So, traditional Jewish, Christian, and Muslim...
Atheist and
Hermeticism. Hey there, guys.
Kermit the Frog.
Hi, Kermit the Frog here.
I was actually just reading a thing earlier today that every time somebody does an interview with the Muppets, they always forget the Muppets aren't people.
You know what? I'm going to tell you that, like, it was far too late in my life when I realized how Muppets work. Because, like, I knew they weren't real, but I didn't know how they were not real. You know what I mean?
No, you're going to have to tell me more.
Like I was like, it's clearly a puppet, but I can see his legs, and he's talking, and he's sitting in a chair with Stephen Colbert. Mm-hmm. So where's the puppet master? I was just like always I was like, I recognize that they can't be, but how are they not?
Okay.
And then I looked up how Muppets work.
Yeah. I think it's funny when they put the microphone on the Muppet instead of on the person providing the voice, and then wonder why the sound is bad.
So you gotta give the Muppet a fake mic.
Yeah, for sure.
Suspend disbelief.
Yes.
And then put one on Frank Oz. Frank Oz is dead, but whoever it is now.
Yeah.
Muppets, man. I fucking love a good Muppet.
Mm-hmm. Or when they're recording an ad and the director shouts at the puppet instead of redirecting the voice at the person controlling the puppet.
Right. I also think I would have been a very good puppeteer.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Have you done a lot of puppeteering?
No, but from what I have done, I think I'm quite good.
Okay.
I think with some practice and some lessons, I could have been a great puppeteer. Sure. Because I'm dramatic, but I don't like being the center of attention. So I could live vicariously through my puppet.
I get you. I mean, I feel like that is very much the way Grover lived his life, or the person underneath Grover.
Anyway, we're not talking about Muppets today.
No. Hermeticism. Better pronounced as Hermeticism.
Hermeticism. Oh man, it's probably going to leave an entire preamble in about me and the Muppets.
I'm okay with that.
I kind of am too. Yes, so we talked briefly about Hermeticism in our occult episode, but we actually think it deserves an entire episode on today's Holy Watermelon Podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than our very brief gloss back in, what was it, October?
Yes, when the cursed October.
Our cursed occultism episode that took several takes.
Far too many takes.
Before we could actually have a saved product that was shareable. It's not that we screwed up over and over again in the performance, but recording.
The devils took the audio.
Yeah, the audio files just kept getting corrupted or lost or
whatever.
Nonsense.
We're better now.
We've grown.
Yes. Hermeticism is also known as Hermetism or Hermetics. And, I mean, all of that comes from the Greek god Hermes.
Yeah. The phrase hermetically sealed, as much as it doesn't sound like it should come from this, it does. Mm-hmm. Not even Hermes could get through to the hermit is a handy little reminder of what it means that something is fully airtight, which is tighter than watertight for those of you who may not have to deal a lot with containers.
For those of you who don't own Tupperware.
But it's actually a really important process in making the Philosopher's Stone, which of course is something that is lost to history. We don't know how to make the Philosopher's Stone anymore. Katie's shaking her head at me. It's not real. There's no evidence that the Philosopher's Stone is real, but an awful lot of stories like to use it in their narrative.
Fair.
Harry Potter went after it. Indiana Jones went after
notably, it. Indiana Jones went after it.
for a much smaller audience.
Right. While Hermetic philosophy has wormed its way into monotheistic traditions, old Hermeticism is pantheistic. God is the ultimate reality and is itself all.
Yeah, while also the creator of all. It's a weird, well...
Self-fertilizing.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we talked about with Ra back in our Egyptology episode. It's a really common way of looking at God in that part of the world. This is a pretty standard Stoic theological declaration that God is all, but also the creator of all, which is a tricky thing to wrap your head around.
The Nag Hammadi library, is that the one that was found because of a murder where the Gnostic Gospels were found?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a wild story.
Yeah, so they just found a whole bunch of books in Nag Hammadi in modern-day Egypt, and calling it a library is a little bit weird. It was a collection of books in a space that was purpose-built, so it is kind of a library.
They were found in like ceramic, massive like terracotta jars and buried, if this is the same one I'm thinking of.
The Dead Sea Scrolls also fit that description.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
No, I read Elaine Pagel's Gnostic Gospels, and she says how they were found, and I think it's Nag Hammadi.
Yeah. And so they were discovered back in 1945, so relatively recent history. This is like after the Second World War.
Yeah, so a huge breakthrough in theological and religious studies, but a whole bunch of them were destroyed.
Yeah.
Because of the murder that they were related to when being found. We'll do a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
Basically, someone murdered someone, and they had found the Gnostic Gospels, and so they were burning them to hide the fact that they had murdered. Like, they didn't want proof that they had put them at the scene of the crime. Except these are super valuable.
Yeah, it's a
historical texts.
Anyway, all of the things that we have found in the Nag Hammadi library basically take up a decent-sized book on the shelf. I've had them on my shelf for years and years now. And it's roughly the size of a Bible, which, of course, Bible more or less means the books. It is also a library. The Nag Hammadi library is a lot more... I want to say contentious. There's a lot more arguing about whether or not it's worth reading the text from the Nag Hammadi library, or at least there used to be. Nowadays, there's a handful of people who find them valuable, and everyone else is like, meh, don't care.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not here to talk about Gnostic Gospels or rejected Christian Gospels, but I think that was a big part of it, is that they didn't make the Bible. Mm-hmm. So now we have to get rid of them or hide them or whatever.
Yeah, well.
Because for whatever reason, we've chosen these records to not be the ones we want people to listen to. Anyway.
It's more of a system of deciding which are authoritative and then just kind of not worrying about the rest. Once you get into the point of banning a specific book, that does help make it more popular, unless you're really good at that first job.
I hope our podcast gets banned.
That'd be all right.
Yeah. Anyway, so importantly, they found Hermetic writings in the Nag Hammadi library before we had this digression.
Not very many, but they did find a few. A couple specifically attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a very important figure in the Hermetic tradition.
What?
If you couldn't have guessed by his name.
We now know that Hermes Trismegistus is a fictional amalgamation of Hermes, the Greek Hermes, and the Egyptian Thoth, with other elements that have been added throughout history.
Yeah, we pointed out in our Egyptian theology episode that the Greeks had just automatically assumed that Thoth and Hermes were equivalent, because that is how they looked at the world.
Yeah.
But
no.
That's not how any of this works. And then, of course, as years went on, aspects of both Imhotep and Amenhotep also ended up getting fused in, making the character a little bit more rounded. And other aspects of whatever people found valuable at a given time also got thrown in.
Trismegistus is important in some Muslim traditions, especially in Sufism, which is the mystical tradition. He is often equated with the prophet Idris as well, or the biblical Enoch.
Yeah. The creator of writing in the Jewish tradition makes sense to be equated with
Thoth in particular, yeah.
The Egyptian equivalent.
People who invented writing.
Yeah. Stories lining up even kind of closely make it really easy for people who don't like thinking about complicated things to combine the figures.
Preston likes pizza and I like pizza. Ergo, we're the same person.
Right? It's like when the Pope decided that 3 different Marys and somebody else who goes fully unnamed in the New Testament are all the same person.
Well, just didn't want to put that much effort into it.
Yeah.
He thought there are too many Bible characters.
These stories that take place in the real world have too large of a cast. Anyway.
So eliminating 3 of literally thousands of characters is...
Yeah.
Anyway.
It simplified things. So
Good.
Sure, that it happened anyway.
Back to the Muslim tradition, Muhammad is said to have encountered Trismegistus. I was like, which him are we referring to? In the 4th heaven.
Mm-hmm. Or Idris, I think is probably the name that it showed up now that I'm thinking back. Having written these notes, going off of memory now, because clearly I put him. Anyway. Also, there's a lot of Christian thinkers that thought Hermes Trismegistus was a pagan prophet who foretold the rise of Christianity.
Interesting.
There's...
like a Nostradamus.
Kind of. Yeah, there's a lot of people in Christendom that have decided, well, yeah, if they were real prophets at all, and they jumped on the bandwagon saying Hermes was, then obviously they would know that Christianity is coming because we're committed to it. It's kind of weird.
Yep.
There's also within this group of Christians who really like Hermes, there's a subset that are fully committed to the idea that Trismegistus as a name means that he was fully committed to the Trinity, that he praised the 3 rather than what the name actually means.
He's thrice great.
Yeah.
Not that the Trinity is great.
Yeah. Yeah, the name Trismegistus is taken from Thoth, the Great, the Great, the Great, which should be understood as the greatest among the greatest of the great. So this dude is the absolute top.
He's the bee's knees.
Exactly. It's kind of like how we see the convention in the Middle Eastern languages, how they talk of the Holy of Holies, or the Sanctum Sanctorum is the holiest of the holy places. So easy enough to get on board with, simple language for a simpler time.
Not particularly quantifiable, but...
Right. But...
But we get what they're... I pick it up when they're laying down.
You're talking about qualities.
Quality, not quantity.
It's like the name Megan, which I think you should never name your child Megan.
I was supposed to be a
unless she is more than 8 pounds at birth or more than 22 inches long at birth. Because the name Megan means big. Or great.
Wow.
But great, really, to be fair, means big.
I don't know how big I was when I was born, but I didn't get named Megan, and I was supposed to be named Megan. So
Okay.
I had big feet when I was born.
Yeah?
Yeah, first thing the doctor said.
Oh, those big old Wile E. Coyote feet.
Yeah,
eh?
basically. You got a clown baby, ma'am.
That's great.
There's also a theory that Hermes Trismegistus may have been a real king. What is that term again?
Hermeneutics.
No.
No, that's something different entirely. Why is the word euhemerism?
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
what I thought. I didn't want to say.
I don't know why I'm just going through words in my head. Like,
Yeah, so
no.
euhemerism, where they believe he may have been a real king with the amalgamation of these gods associated with him, because there are writings attributed to him. So how, but we also know that he's the amalgamation of two gods. So the chances of him being a real person with these gods glommed to him later
It's possible,
It's
but
reasonable.
my bets are against it.
And who wrote the stuff?
Well, there's an awful lot of strong traditions all over this area, geographically and historically, where people like writing and publishing a book under somebody else's name. Egypt and Greece and all over the Middle East, actually. It's
Another Middle Eastern religion.
Yeah. I mean, Egypt isn't strictly Middle East,
No,
it's Northern Africa, but culturally they're well connected to Greece and
Arabic.
the Levant. Yeah. So it's a thing that we see. And so my inclination is that literally all of the writings credited to Hermes Trismegistus are what we call pseudepigraphical, which means written under a false name.
Oh, that's a great word.
Right?
Wow.
It looks long in writing, and the only reason I could say it in one go like that is because I've said it many times before.
All I saw was the word pig.
Sure? Right in the middle?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can put lipstick on a pig, but
You can't pseudepigraphical a pig,
sure you could.
I guess.
And this book was written by Babe, the pig in the city.
It's autobiographical. So because of these god-like associations, Hermes Trismegistus, if you're a Hermetic, is considered to be the founder of science, math, philosophy, and more.
Yeah. What a pitch. I like it.
Run, don't walk to your nearest Hermetical society.
Sure. Yeah. So among the writings that were found in Nag Hammadi, there is one Hermetic text that talks about the Egyptian mystery schools and the nature of the great mysteries of God. I thought was kind of interesting. Basically, mystery schools are initiatic traditions that offer a knowledge that's secret for some reason or another, and a little bit at a time, given by degree to their priests or magi or whatever they want to call the members of their order as they rise through the ranks of that order. And there's usually a mythological narrative wrapped around all of that. This is pretty familiar to people in the Temple of Set, I want to say, the Church of Satan, and Freemasons, a couple of Christian churches, not any of the mainstream ones though, and shows up kind of, sort of, in the Latter-day Saint tradition as well, but not really in the same way. But it's kind of nifty. Secret knowledge is, in most mystery schools, more of a distinction between classes than a reason for different classes. Just kind of a deliberate, here's separations between the orders.
Okay.
Makes people feel special.
Unless you're not in any of them.
Sure.
Hermetic writings got really popular during the Renaissance until Isaac Casaubon published that he could find no evidence that any of the texts dated before the 2nd century CE. So this is super frustrating to the Christians who thought that Hermes was a real person, contemporary of Moses or even older.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me that, now I don't think anyone, well, I shouldn't say that's unfair. We did our episode on Greeks, but very few people think anyone in the Greek pantheon was actually real, and very few people think that they're still real. So it's interesting to me that Christians, one God, were like disappointed that another god didn't exist.
So for Christian Hermetics, Hermes Trismegistus wasn't a god or god combo
Hermes,
figure,
Hermes.
but he was just, that was the name given to a triply great prophet.
That triply loved the Trinity.
Yeah, before Moses.
Wow.
Most Hermetic philosophical writings are based on the ideas of Platonists and Stoicism, combined into traditional Egyptian wisdom, and fairly often there's little sprinklings of Persian and Jewish ideas thrown in there too, just to make it look exotic to whoever is reading.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Ooh. So there's two categories. There are two categories of writings. They're either technical or philosophical or religious. Technical is how to do magic things. So alchemy, medicine, astrology, that kind of stuff.
The things that you get to do. Yeah.
Practice. And then the philosophical is how we think about the world to gain power over it. And this also includes things like anthropology and theology.
Understanding people, understanding God, all tricky nonsense. And so, as much as you can argue all you want against the technical stuff of, I tried this alchemy process 100 times, never worked, it's a lot harder to argue against the philosophical writings in a concrete way. You can say, yeah, I disagree with that, or no, that this idea has no value, but more discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally what we do here every other week. And it ties in with our belief episode. Like, you can think you know someone, you never really know someone.
Sure.
Or how their beliefs come about, or that's a rabbit hole. I'm not willing to go down right now.
There's some pretty cool texts in the Hermetic tradition, though. The Emerald Tablet is a nifty thing. It's attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. It's basically lost to time. Whether or not there ever was actually an Emerald Tablet, we have no way of knowing.
I was very confused when I was researching it because there's quotes that will be familiar to our listeners that come from the Emerald Tablet, but I couldn't actually find if it existed or not.
Yeah, the oldest reproduction of the text is an Arabic manuscript dating to around 800 CE. And if it's a copy of text that somebody had carved into the Emerald Tablet, or just something that somebody wrote down on
And said
parchment,
it came from an Emerald Tablet, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. But there's a bunch of different interpretations that came out as it has been translated into Latin by different editors in different places at different times. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't really have the authoritative text of the Emerald Tablet. But of course, the question of, did it ever exist? But it's kind of cool.
It is a revered, I was going to say document, but I guess it's a tablet.
I mean, at this point, it's a document.
It's a document. It's revered by alchemists. It's supposed to be part of the finding the philosopher. It's a piece of the Philosopher's Stone puzzle. And it's where we get the popular phrase, as above, so below. And the full quote of that, again, this is where I was like, is this real? Because it says from the Emerald Tablet, but clearly it's from the reproduction. Is that which is above is like to that which is below. And that which is below is like to that which is above. And it gets abbreviated to the much more common as above, so below.
Because it's way easier to remember 4 words without screwing it up than that whole line.
But what the heck does that even mean, Preston?
It basically means that the world that we know is more or less a facsimile of what we see in the heavens, and the world beyond that we can't actually see. But also in that same way, what we see in the heavens is, what we can see in the heavens is a great way of understanding the little things. This helps, this seems more valid when we compare the atomic model to the heliocentric model of our solar system. That we've got a thing in the middle and a whole bunch of stuff whizzing around it real quick. So that's basically it. If you can understand yourself, you can understand the bigger concepts like spirituality, the universe, physics. Everything's connected.
This kind of gave me some Buddhist vibes.
That's fair.
This part of it, and we'll get into other principles of Hermeticism in a moment. But this particular one where they're, understanding the self is understanding God. I was like, that's giving me Eastern tradition vibes, Buddhism in particular, but a little bit of Hinduism.
Yeah, it seems pretty fair to me.
Anyway, just interesting how everything works together.
Right. Well, and something else that is a common idea in Hermeticism is the idea that there is a true theology that is presented in some sort of flawed way in every religion around the world. And so it does basically pull everything really tightly together, or less tightly if you're a little more off the beaten path.
I was going to say, unless you're a jerk.
Right.
We haven't said don't be a dick in a long time, so
don't be a dick.
I'll just gentle reminder, dear listener. Don't be a dick.
The Emerald Tablet also contains the 3 disciplines taught by Trismegistus: alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. We'll get a little bit more into that later on. But these are the 3 important wisdoms of the universe.
And this is where, and we'll chat about this, but the lines, I don't want to say the lines blur, but when we, this is why Hermeticism came up in our occult episode, because of these practices. Honestly, digging deeper into Hermeticism, I think the occult is just a bunch of hooey. Like, I think you asked anyone to, people who are scared of the occult and were like, don't read Harry Potter because the occult, couldn't actually explain to you what the occult is.
For sure.
Right? Anyway.
Unless very often the default is, it's magic. And magic is bad, I guess.
Which this makes the next point interesting to me. Again, especially when you get the people who are whatever scared of Harry Potter or fill in the blank. The Emerald Tablet appeared in the Eternals, so now I actually need to go back and watch it.
I only watched the movie once. I'm gonna be honest, it did not jump out at me.
No, it was like when I was doing the research, it was in passing that I know Druid was involved, but I don't know if he said it or it was like the recipient. But someone was like, "Where'd you get that cool Emerald Tablet?" Is basically the
Okay.
Where'd you pick that up? Was sort of the reference, and so I don't know if it'll be important later or if it was just like this is cute.
Sure. I mean, pretty often when it shows up in any narrative, it's a big deal. It shows up in Dark, show on Netflix, is a time traveler thriller. And it's a dude's got a tattooed on his back, it shows up on a door. Both of these images are actually taken from a drawing of somebody's impression of what the Emerald Tablet probably looks like. The dude had it drawn into a book about 800 years after the stone was supposedly lost, or more. Kind of tricky, but
back to my point, and we can elaborate on it when we wrap up the episode. But again, these people get all mad about Harry Potter and the occult. It's like, A, did you even notice it in the Eternals? B, do you know what it means? And C, like, do you care?
right.
Like, and when we get into the 7 principles, like, there's so much Hermeticism just in our everyday lives that if you equate Hermeticism with the occult, and again, I think most people can't actually define the occult because we had a hell of a time doing it. Like, I don't know what my final point of that was. My brain stopped.
Don't slam a thing you don't understand.
Thank you.
Don't be a dick.
Thank you. I don't think people realize how much of our stuff comes from non-Christian places, especially in the West.
Yeah.
I'll just step down from my soapbox.
All right. Next text we have on our list is the Corpus Hermeticum, which I think is kind of nifty.
I just thought the first fact was nifty because I am an art history nerd.
All right.
If you are like me and an art history nerd, you'll appreciate that Cosimo de' Medici had the Corpus Hermeticum translated into Latin from Greek.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that Cosimo had paid a couple of translators to do a whole bunch of work of translating the works of Plato, but as soon as they got their hands on the Corpus Hermeticum, they dropped that.
It's like, stop that shit.
We got to do this. This is way more important.
So if you're not an art history nerd,
I'm not.
I'm going to spend like 2 seconds on the Medicis. So the Medicis were the first family of influence that didn't have a royal, they weren't royals. They just had a ton of money. They were bankers when usury was still a thing. So they got a lot of wealth and power from just being bankers, to the point where one of the Medicis became pope. But Cosimo in particular, he paid for so much art in Florence. Like some of the best things that you go and see and learn about in school were paid for by Cosimo, including Donatello's David and the Duomo, the big dome in Florence, and a whole bunch of other crazy cool art stuff. So, but he
I've
had
never even heard of Donatello's David.
What? Oh,
I've heard of Michelangelo's David.
oh no, no, it's Donatello's David. It's like a little boy,
Okay.
and he's like naked and holding a sling.
Okay.
Donatello is also a raging homosexual, so I'll show
As
you afterwards.
opposed to a normal homosexual?
Yes.
He was just a very angry fella.
I mean, yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
This would have made a lot of people in the church very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I'll show you Donatello's David
Okay.
afterwards, and it would have made a lot of people in the church uncomfortable. Very different.
I mean, a lot of people in the church are uncomfortable with Michelangelo's David just because he's got
Did
his
you
pecker
know?
out.
I think we talked about this in an episode where they chipped off all the penises, and it's someone's job to now match the penises with the statues.
Yeah, we talked about
Yeah,
that.
we did. Anyway, so that's why Cosmo's interesting. We're not an art history podcast, but if you like that stuff,
Cool.
the Medicis are bitchin'.
Yeah, for me, Donatello's a Ninja Turtle, and I know that all of the Ninja Turtles are
Renaissance artists.
Yeah, but no, for me, Donatello's just the
pizza
turtle
eating
the
turtle.
stick.
Okay. Anyway, so the Corpus Hermeticum is a theological and philosophical text, and the name suggests that it's a collected writings on the subject, when it is just actually a very small collection of treatises, kind of like the Bible.
Yeah, it's not the whole of everything. It's just a handful. The first in the collection is Pomandres. There's a lot of different ways this word is pronounced, depending on
Pomandries.
who you studied with, really. And the great thing is that no matter how you're saying it wrong.
Oh.
It's actually a butchered remnant of an old Egyptian name that translates to the knowledge of Ra. Poimandres is the Greek name that's generally accepted, and it means man shepherd when it's forced into that Greek pronunciation. But that's just not what it is. It's the knowledge of Ra, which makes perfect sense considering the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the theology in Egypt. So that's what it is. Anyway, that's struggles, language things. I nerd out over the language bits.
And I nerd out over art history.
But like a lot of Hermetic writings, the Corpus Hermeticum is basically mostly a dialogue between Hermes and various others. In fact, another great text is the dialogue between Hermes Trismegistus and Asclepius.
Ooh, what a great name.
Yeah. The book is sometimes called The Perfect Sermon, or sometimes just Asclepius, because this is who Hermes is talking to. Asclepius, if you don't remember, is the Greek god of medicine. And the rod of Asclepius is fairly common symbol with medicine of the single snake around the stick. Different than the caduceus, which is two snakes wrapped around a stick with wings. But they're both pretty well used around the world. So Asclepius is another god that Hermes, a god, is talking to.
Cool.
Yeah. And this is part, or at least part of it, survived into the Nag Hammadi library. And so I've read it, and it is a trip. It's fairly apocalyptic.
Cool.
It talks about how Egypt will one day be a desert. So here's the problem. The book was written after Egypt had been a desert for a long time.
I was going to say, hasn't it always been a desert?
About 10,000 years ago, it was in the monsoon path, and so it was actually
quite lush.
Fairly green and nice. But it's been a desert for more than 4,000 years. And these writings are not that old. They're not.
What a prophet.
But it's a great way of making it look old and presenting a prophecy that has already been fulfilled. So obviously the next prophecies are going to be great. It talks about how the Nile will run with more blood than water.
Don't like that.
Right? That's gross. Some people will see this as being fulfilled in the days of Moses or in our distant future. You got options. And then, of course, there's this weird statement that says that when atheism pervades, the air will be unbreathable.
Uh-oh.
I mean, atheism is getting more popular, and we are working really hard to make our air unbreathable, but I don't think we're there
Causation
yet.
does not equal correlation. Wait, correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah. It's an interesting prediction. It's an interesting prediction. But yeah, correlation, causation, tricky nonsense.
Yeah.
What I found was really interesting is when I cracked open my book yesterday to go through and read Asclepius again, it starts with a talk about sex.
What kind of talk about sex? Like birds and the bees or like porn?
More birds and bees than porn, but he's like very serious about sharing fluids and sharing strength while sharing fluids. And don't have sex in front of people who haven't had sex yet.
Don't have sex in front of
it.
people generally.
Yeah, it's a weird talk.
Can you please read it to your future child when it comes time?
Sure. I can say that is a plan, and whether or not that happens, we'll see.
Perfect. If not, I'll take on the role as Auntie Katie and be like, sit down, son. We're going to have a talk about the birds and the bees.
Well, and I mean, the way it's worded does actually make it fit as a perfectly reasonable text to read from when you want to have that first chat about the birds and the bees. Even though it feels a little bit weird, read it yourself before you read it to your kids,
okay.
I think. But I think it's not wildly inappropriate to share with a 10-year-old. That's fine.
Okay. Well, okay. Yeah. All right. And then the last book we're going to talk about today is the Kybalion. It was originally published in 1908, and it conveys the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus.
As much as anything does.
As much as anything does. It is published with author credit to 3 initiates, but it looks like it was written by William Walker Atkinson, a prolific occultist writer known to have written under false names like Magus Incognito and Yogi Ramacharaka.
Yeah.
Charaka, excuse me. I got too excited. Yogi Ramacharaka. I'm making it worse. Look at the audio on me trying to say. Oh boy.
Yeah, good old Bill used a lot of false names to write a lot of different books. Kind of interesting. Yogi Ramacharaka is one of his more popular names, and Magus Incognito is my favorite.
That's a great name.
Right? Just the priest that doesn't want to be known.
Love it. Love it. It also sounds like a really weird detective from the 1920s.
Sure.
Like, I want to write a novel about Magus Incognito.
I thought it was nifty. The Kabbalion on the title page says that its publisher's home base, a Masonic temple in Chicago. So I couldn't find whether or not he was a Freemason or just well connected in that community. I don't think it makes a big difference, but it's kind of nifty. And William Walker Atkinson was also really into Hinduism and yoga in particular, which we've talked about a couple of times already in our podcast as well. And this dude was a lawyer. Like, he passed the bar in Chicago and served as a lawyer all over Illinois, while also writing a lot of books.
Interesting. Good for
Yeah,
him.
this
Good
guy's-
for him.
I don't think he was quite as prolific as, say, L. Ron Hubbard.
Or
but-
R.L. Stein.
Right. But
We're big fans of Goosebumps here.
I did read a lot of Goosebumps as a kid.
Didn't we all?
But he's got more than 100 titles under his belt.
Wow.
Most of which are still in circulation in collected works today, which is kind of cool.
That is really cool. The Kybalion is where we get the condensed 7 principles of Hermeticism.
Yeah. It's interesting that people are so scared of the occult. If you read self-help or life coaching books, these concepts are going to show up. That's kind of the secret. That was a big thing, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, they're still reprinting it
Yeah.
with updated stories. From like a belief standpoint, as the resident atheist, I don't hate this.
Sure.
And, Bill was an occult writer, and we talked about astrology and alchemy and theurgy. But from occult perspective, this doesn't have anything to do with that. They talk about energy, which we'll chat about. And, I don't really believe in crystals or Reiki, but we do scientifically know everything is made of energy. So I think and when we get to the points, there is some truth to all of these points, but there's probably, any religion, there's some truth to all the points. That's how they
That's
get
the
you.
trick. Yeah. The things that we have in this book, they're not strictly classically Hermetic ideas, but it adds to Hermeticism for anyone who's interested in them. And they've wormed their way into most modern Hermetic thinking.
So principle number 1 is essentially visualization, or like Preston mentioned, the secret. If you focus on wherever you set your focus to, you can manifest things into being. There's been a ton of research done on visualization. So while there are some wild stories in The Secret, there's one about a man who willed his eyes to be better, to be 20/20. I'm like, there's lots of benefits if you're an athlete or a performer or goal setting to going through some visualization practices.
This idea fits kind of nicely into Scientology too. And Neil Gaiman, who I didn't know was a Scientologist until you told me he was, at least for a little while, he incorporates this idea into the creation and how gods come to be in his book American Gods, which I just finished reading and really, really loved.
Nice. I think some of this, from lots of people, lots of coaches and things like that, like Tony Robbins talks about visualization. There's also I forget what it's called, your something activating system in your brain. So when you buy a red car, all of a sudden everyone owns a red car.
Oh, yeah.
Right, there's actually something, I forget what it's called. Someone's going to at me for this. But there's something in your brain that when you're focused on it, now you see it everywhere. So I think that plays, and it's an actual part of your brain, that plays into this as well, right? If you focus on, my friend always says she gets rock star parking all the time. She probably doesn't, but because she focuses on all the time she's gotten rock star parking, now she always thinks she gets rockstar parking. She probably gets rockstar parking more often because of it. Rockstar parking being like right outside the store.
Yeah.
Minus the handicap spot.
I get you. Because those handicap spots are always empty.
Well, and you can't. Those are not rockstar spots. Just to be clear.
I mean, they are if you want them to be.
Wow, Preston, what did we just say like 3 minutes ago about being a dick?
Don't be a dick.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Number 2, please.
Correspondence. This is the whole as above, so below concept, that the world is the same thing on different levels.
That was an easy one.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it, so
You'll
then we can move on to the next
All
one.
right. Number 3 is vibration. So good vibes. If you have a coffee mug or a notepad that says good vibes on it, and you're a devout Christian scared of the occult, you better smash and or burn it. Because
Sure.
it is a hermetic thing. Good vibes. So everything is energy. We know scientifically everything is energy, which is where, again, I find Hermeticism super interesting.
But smashing the coffee mug that says good vibes is bad vibes.
Fair. Maybe donate it if it's a problem in your world. And everything is moving constantly. Like we know atoms are always moving, some faster than others, some looser or tighter than others. So the idea is that if you want to resonate at a higher frequency, you surround yourself with higher vibration things. So from like a practical perspective, like we all have that friend that's Eeyore, and you never feel good after spending time with Eeyore, as cute as Eeyore is, or your Eeyore friend. So that's the idea, right? We like hanging out with people that are fun and positive and whatever. And when you hang out with those people, you feel more fun and positive and energetic. That's the concept there.
Not that you should never hang out with Eeyore, but
You set boundaries around Eeyore.
yeah, Eeyore needs boundaries.
Eeyore needs a lot of boundaries.
Yeah.
And Eeyore personally needs therapy. You need to set boundaries around Eeyore, and Eeyore needs to see a therapist.
Yeah. For sure. Anyway, next on our list.
Oh, this episode, Muppets and Winnie the Pooh.
At least Winnie is in the public domain now.
Aw, heck yeah.
I don't know if... No, I'm sure Eeyore was in those first books.
I don't know.
I could be wrong.
I don't think we're going to get sued for saying Eeyore.
No, we're not going to get in any trouble for saying it, no.
Eeyore.
But...
Eeyore's going to sue us for defamation. I don't need therapy.
Truth is a perfect defense. Anyway, 4th on the list of these 7 principles is polarity. That everything is the same thing, just on varying degrees. A really obvious example of this is temperature. Both hot and cold are temperatures. Cold is just a lot less warm than heat is. But that's more or less the basics of it. Everything's the same. There's also this idea that comes up, the phrasing is, all truths are but half-truths. Feels a little bit weird, but when you think about trying to communicate with somebody, you can present facts and you can present truths, and if you're trying to accomplish one over the other, the words you use are different. And it's hard to present a thing in a way that encompasses all of the truth of a thing.
I mean, this is kind of like the phrase, there's, 3 sides to every argument, his, hers, and the truth.
Right? Yeah.
That's what I think of immediately.
Yeah. Actually, going back to Neil Gaiman, he describes in American Gods, I think it was in the appendix or at the very end of the book, how if you want a perfectly accurate map, the only way to do that is to have the land itself, which, if you're looking for a map, is functionally useless. So, truth is a tricky thing.
Mm-hmm. Number 5 is rhythm. So the idea is that there's an ebb and flow to life, and you can work with those ebb and flows to reduce the dramatic fluctuations of your life. So basically accepting That sometimes things will be awesome, sometimes things will not be so awesome. Sometimes it's summer, sometimes it's winter in Canada. If you're in Florida or something, lucky you. But to accept that waning and waxing will make your life much easier.
And happier.
And happier. So you can be a high vibe person.
Next on our list, point number 6 is cause and effect. That everything has a cause and an effect.
Truth.
Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause. And it's actually really important that these principles are laid out in that way. That nothing just happens out of nothing. Which is weird when you look at the theology of Hermeticism, that the God that is all, but also created all, actually doesn't have a cause, but is the cause. It's tricky.
I like it.
It's so tricky.
I like it.
But you can either be active and make things happen, or you can just be a vessel that is acted upon, and that's going to not work out for you.
Yes, so Hermeticism encourages that you are the cause in your life as opposed to being the effect of your life.
And I've heard a few religions use this as well, that you need to be the agent, the actor, the one making things happen rather than being passive and receptive.
Yeah. And number 7 is gender. So I reworded this, but basically it's regardless of your genitalia or your gender identity, we both have masculine and feminine energies within us. This kind of ties into polarity and even rhythm. And that the goal is to find a healthy balance between your masculine and feminine energies.
I'm pretty comfortable with my current balance. Not that nobody needs a little bit of adjustment, but I'm comfortable.
You're not toxically masculine, so that's good.
Right? Yes. Toxic masculinity. The perfect red flag for somebody who is naturally a lot more feminine than they want to admit.
Just embrace it. You'll be so much happier.
Right?
You'll vibe higher. We don't have an episode name at the time I'm saying this, but I feel like it should be like good vibes and bloody tears. I'm kidding. That's a reference.
Blue Jeans and Bloody Tears is a weird song.
It is one of my favorites.
I feel weird about it being one of your favorites, but I do have
There's
to go back to it fairly
great
often.
key changes, and I just get way too excited every time.
Man. Machines, a great evidence of some sort of alchemy.
I like it. Speaking of alchemy, Preston.
Yes, the 3 parts of the wisdom of the universe that we talked about briefly before and said we'd talk about later. Alchemy is the first. It's basically chemistry, but fancier. It has more power than the chemistry that we're familiar with. Alchemy is the power to change small things in the material world, turning mercury or quicksilver into gold, or lead into gold, or mercury into silver.
Iron into gold. I just read a book about that.
Yeah, you've got, honestly, an awful lot of options. If your alchemy practices are legit, then you can turn base metals into precious metals. And that's kind of cool, in theory.
In practice,
the heat that would be produced by changing atoms would be devastating. Not that it's impossible. We've proven that you can change one element to another. It takes a lot more effort than alchemy suggests.
you can't get it hot enough.
I mean, I don't know if you can produce the pressure to turn lead into gold. It's a little more complicated than that. There's also a nice little allegorical value to the principles of alchemy, that if you are sensitive and thoughtful, you have the power to change a weak man into a strong one. there's some good value there. That turning yourself from lead into gold is the real goal.
Steve Rogers.
The golden boy.
Then we have astrology, which is, of course, the power to read the stars as the handiwork and message board of the gods. So, yeah, being able to predict the future and learn things about people based off of the stars.
Not a thing I'm on board with. I don't even find allegorical value in it, but it's interesting to see that people have been studying the stars for so long and have put so much value into it.
Mm-hmm. Astronomy, on the other hand.
Astronomy is super cool, and a lot of people get the two confused. It doesn't help that astrology is a word that means the study of the stars, and astronomy is the study of the stars for a different purpose.
Yes.
It's frustrating.
Yep.
And so many of the genuinely accepted sciences end with ology, biology,
chemology.
Okay.
Physicology.
Thank you for pointing out the perfect flaw in my scheme.
Botanology. Yeah, all my favorites. And enology, you are correct.
There's a lot of sciences that do end with ology, and thanks to you, I'm blanking on any of them.
Herbology is a real science. Animal husbandology is a science.
Astrology is legit as Scientology, and that's where I'm stuck now.
Oh, poor Preston. If you can think of enology that's a real science, because I sure can't. Post it in our Discord.
Well, that's what we get. When preparing for this, I didn't think I would need a list of legit sciences that end with ology.
You didn't think Katie was so smart on her science, eh?
Let's just move on.
Human sexology. Medicinology. Sorry, I gotta stop. Kinesiology.
Yeah, that's real.
There you go. Sorry, theurgy.
I feel bad that the only one that could come to my mind right away was biology. But anyway, next on our list of the 3 parts of the wisdom of the universe, we have theurgy, which relies a little bit on alchemy and astrology, but is the powerful acts of God in the universe. That is a power that even people can actually wield, in theory, by union with benevolent spirits that grant this power to man, as opposed to making a deal with the devil and having a totally different power, which is still a reality within the principles of Hermeticism. Theurgy is a rather complicated bit because it's having the power of God, which is, of course, the dream for literally anybody who's really into Hermeticism, or even people who just aren't satisfied with their personal power in this life, whatever your religious tradition is. But getting that power is a pretty tricky business. And that's part of the pursuit of alchemy and astrology, is to be able to understand and prepare yourself to wield that power, which is kind of cool. Like many other religious traditions, Hermetic theology states that humanity has fallen from perfection and will live through cycles of reincarnation until the cycle is broken by obtaining and applying the wisdom of the universe. It's a pretty decent goal, a decent understanding that explains why people are so terrible to each other, because we're fallen. It's a fairly common statement among religious traditions, especially from the the east side of the Mediterranean Sea.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know why I got my directions mixed up, but it is the east side of the Mediterranean Sea where this idea is really an important principle of religion.
Yeah. To wrap up, I just kind of want to talk about how it connects to the occult. Do we think it's occult, especially when there's so much of it, I guess, hidden in plain sight in our everyday lives? What are your thoughts?
I think that's a weird question.
Okay. Did I
we-
weird it weird?
Maybe that's the problem. Generally, when we use the word occult, we're talking about knowledge or power that needs to be hidden from the masses. And even though the literature of Hermeticism is fairly available, there's still secrets that are very effectively hidden. And so that makes it pretty easy to say that it is occult.
Mm-hmm.
And is alchemy fitting into that category of pseudosciences that is more recently applied to what we consider occult? I think fairly so. Astrology, yes, 100%. But a lot of people look at occult as, oh, that's dangerous.
Right.
Don't touch that. And
Good vibes. It's pretty positive.
I mean, I don't see any danger in Hermeticism. So if that's how you describe what is occult, I'm going to say no. But needing to have a conversation about definitions before talking about a thing is, it's annoying, but it's a very real
Important,
and necessary
especially-
part of having religious discussions.
I was going to say, especially in this world.
Yes.
When people toss around a whole bunch of things that are just wrong.
Right? Like, you can have somebody say something to you and go, yes, all of those words that you've used in that order make a true statement. But the idea that you have behind those words and ideas is false. Or sometimes you have the opposite, where it's like, I know that what you're thinking is right, but what you said is dumb. And there's everything in between those two extremes, too.
I love it. So Hermeticism, fascinating, influential, and not dangerous.
I think so. I think it's fascinating. Not
I
that
think
I've
it's
put
great.
in enough study to have a stronger grasp on it than I have, but I think it's cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. Speaking of alchemy, you should get your hands on some Holy Watermelon merch.
Wow.
This is not a great segue.
No, it was really bad, but I'll accept it. He means it because it's like it will transform you from that lesser man to a greater man if you wear a Holy Watermelon t-shirt.
It'll take you from your current state into a billboard for the Holy Watermelon.
A higher state.
I like it.
You will vibe higher wearing a Holy Watermelon t-shirt. Boy.
We've also got all kinds of other merch. You should check out our shop.
Or if you want to support us on an ongoing basis, we also have a Patreon where for a small monthly fee, you can get early access and bonus episodes.
Yeah, we're having some good fun with our bonus episodes.
Yes. Also check us out on Discord. We're building a great community and having some awesome conversations about religious studies, which is nice to see and have, and questions and challenges.
And our meme game is just fantastic.
Chef's kiss. Mwah.
Thank you for joining us.
Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecies had fulfilled itself.
God is near.